Welcome, attendees. My name is Chris Porter. I'm on the board of directors at Folk Alliance International, and I am also the owner of Porter Productions, as well as the talent director for the festival Hardly Strictly Bluegrass. Thanks so much for joining us for this panel presented by Folk Alliance International for Folk Unlocked. Before we begin, let's take a moment to acknowledge that we are joined today by folks from all around the globe using technology that is not accessible to all. We recognize the importance, complexity, and difficulty of land acknowledgements in the context of online organizing, creation, and collaboration. We invite you to join in acknowledging our shared responsibility to use this time together well, and for each of us to consider our roles in reconciliation, decolonization, and active allyship. Further, I acknowledge I am tuning in from Seattle, Washington, the traditional territory of the Duwamish people. We hope you will share your own acknowledgement as well as thoughts throughout this panel in the Folk Unlocked chat. This panel will be available for viewing for the remainder of the conference once it is aired at its scheduled time. Our moderator for this particular session is Michelle Demers Shaevitz of the Mission Folk Music Festival. Michelle's worked for the festival since 1991 and is currently the festival's artistic director and festival producer. In addition to a 10-year career in university student services, she also previously held a programming position at Northwest Folklife and now serves as the chair on their board of directors. Splitting her time between Mission, BC and Seattle, Washington, she also produces house concerts and is currently working on her master's degree in arts and events management while raising her son, Elliot, with her husband, Ben. And I'm also compelled to say that Michelle is a big NHL hockey fan, and she and I can't wait to watch games together in Seattle this coming fall. So Michelle, with that, take it away.
Thanks, Chris. Yes, we bond over folk music and hockey. Thank you to Folk Alliance for encouraging us to gather and explore the topic of rituals with this amazing group of culture workers. Like Chris, I'm coming to you from the traditional territory of the Duwamish people of the Coast Salish region. And we are excited to gather and discuss festival rituals. This topic started in person last year in New Orleans, where we discussed a variety of ways in which festivals developed or encouraged or engaged rituals as part of their production. We are going to continue that conversation today with an amazing group of individuals. We want to look at what are festival rituals and how are those facilitated. We are interested in how community influences those festival rituals, both the community of artists, the community of audience. And we're really interested in how, in this time of COVID, the impact of shifting from in-person gatherings to online formats have affected that. And I look forward to hearing from all of our panelists on their thoughts and discussions today. So we are going to start with Alan Greyeyes from the Sākihiwē Festival in Manitoba. Alan and I have been to a lot of conferences together, and Alan is also a hockey fan, so we've bonded a little bit over that. But Alan, I'm interested in what ritual means to you in the context of this conversation in your festival.
Thanks, Michelle. Well, rituals for us is a little different than our counterparts, I think, across the country. We're a smaller organization, smaller festival. What we do is take music to divested neighborhoods throughout the Winnipeg's core. So I'm out here in Treaty 1 territory, and we do that because I feel like Indigenous families oftentimes aren't able to participate in the arts like our Canadian counterparts or American counterparts can. It's partially because of ticket prices, family responsibilities, and cultural isolation, I find. And so when you go to an event and you don't see other people that look like you, I think it's really, it can be off-putting and isolating. So like I said, we take music to these low-income neighborhoods, which means that our audience is a lot younger and not trained in the sense that, they know how to show up with their canteens or their coolers and their blankets and chairs and stuff. They're oftentimes showing up, just coming outside of their houses and where we have set up. So again, rituals for us is a little different. That being said, on the organizational side, I'd say instead of rituals, I'd call it ceremony. And so it's really important for us as an organization to start everything in a good way. And for us, that means our chairperson often initiates and passes tobacco to elders to have a sweat lodge ceremony. And it's our way of, asking for the support of our ancestors and the spirits throughout the land to, make things welcoming for our audiences and the artists that are traveling to the territory as well.
Oh, thank you, Alan. Kamara, do you have any thoughts about that coming from North Carolina and Country Soul Songbook? Do you want to address that? Oh, you're muted.
There we go. We're a really new festival, and in fact, we kind of got dragged into the future and kind of got into the festival game kind of inadvertently because of the pandemic year, which it ended up being kind of an exciting thing because we kind of all of a sudden were like, we're going to throw this festival. There's only 3 of us. We're going to throw in this virtual online festival, and what are we going to construct? And I think all 3 of us, it was myself, Heather Cook, and Kim Register. We thought a lot about how to construct our festival, especially because our organization is dedicated to amplifying BIPOC and LGBTQ2IA voices, and we wanted to gather community and almost like create ritual that was nourishing for the community. And on a personal level, I'm very I create my own ritual. I would call myself a forest witch, so I'm constantly interacting with the land and trying to discover what ritual means for myself. And so that was a big part of our conversation as we constructed this virtual summit to figure out, what those rituals should be. Also, I forgot to introduce that I'm coming from the ancestral lands of the Shakori, and the Saponi nations, and so our first step was literally to reach out to to all of the indigenous organizations that we could, just from where we were sitting, and making sure that that just like calling in calling out where we were standing was important. And so we found a man named Lawrence Dunmore who is willing to conduct his ancestral an ancestral calling in to welcome us to the land. And I would also mention that Heather Cook runs the North Star Church of the Arts, which is a big organization in Durham, a venue that is dedicated to amplifying these voices too. And so all of this is just a constant conversation. How can we begin to create ritual and new ritual for our community in a way that acknowledges the land that we're on, acknowledges the present moment, acknowledges the ancestors of ourselves and the lands that we're on. So it started there, and then I think we're just still in conversation about that. And I will say that there was that moment when we began our online journey. It was 4 days, 35 hours. It was a nonstop kind of, we called it a shenaniganza, where we really provided people with that information of like, it's time to go check out whose land you're on, and put that in the chat, and really invited people to engage that as they came in. And the feeling that was generated was so profound. And I think as we, it's kind of become this like thing that you do, when you start the thing. And I think, I just know that at our festival, it really felt like, especially because we were all gathering as these kind of marginalized voices in this music, it felt really profound to acknowledge that land and to sink into that, and to acknowledge like our spirit our spirits in the space of that, which I think, I don't know. It was just a really amazing experience.
Oh, that sounds lovely, and fulfilling. And I'm wondering, yourself and Gerry, you're both musicians as well as presenters. And Gerry, welcome. You're coming to us from the farthest away in New Zealand there. And Gerry, I wanted to know what ritual means to you in the context of both your work in the festivals, organizations, and as an artist.
Kia ora koutou. No mai haere mai tēnā koutou katoa. Greetings from Aotearoa, New Zealand, here at the bottom of the world. And the festival that I run is called Cuba Duper, which is a huge street festival that happens on the last weekend of March. We have 100,000 people that come into the precinct for 2 days, 470 shows, nearly 2,000 artists. And I guess one of our, the local iwi or tribe here is called Te Ati Awa. And they're based here in Poneke, between here and Taranaki, which is heading up the west coast of Aotearoa, the North Island. And one of the big rituals we have is our Mihi Fokato. And that's our welcoming ceremony where we welcome people onto the site and we say a karakia or a prayer. So this is done by a local kamatua, which is one of our Māori elders. And part of the ceremony involves a taiaha warrior who throws out a wero, which is spelled W-E-R-O. And we invite the visiting artists to parade onto their main stage. And then the taiaha warriors throw down a leaf as a challenge. And it's basically asking, are you coming here with goodwill, you know? And they do a taiaha dance, which is very intimidating and almost could be, quite confronting. And then the visitor has to pick up the leaf and then respond with a piece of music or an answer. So, for example, we had the Free Agents brass band from New Orleans come a few years ago, and these are huge, big musicians, big African-American musicians, wonderful. And afterwards they told me, we were so scared. They were shaking afterwards. And then they played the music in response to this, and there's this beautiful exchange between the landholders and the visitors onto the land. And it really sets a beautiful, atmosphere and kind of precedent going forward. So that's sort of our biggest ritual that we have at Cuba Duper.
Oh, thank you, Gerry. It would be stunning to watch, and is actually the perfect segue to Christine. Christine and I had the pleasure of working together last year with the inaugural version of this workshop where we discussed rituals at in-person festivals. Christine is coming to us from New Orleans and the Jazz and Heritage Festival. And Christine, I would love to hear from you about what ritual means to you in the context of this conversation.
Well, for me, it's as the festival programmer, it's always a question of what's intentional and what's organic. And so much of our programming is the intentional ritual, how we celebrate the culture and the heritage of New Orleans. You know, we're this very, very unique place where where the Africans met and the West Indies met, and the Euro, we were owned by France, and then we were owned by Spain, and France again, and then America. And this whole collaboration of the world coming together in New Orleans, that's what created jazz, the combination of all this music. So our festival is the celebration of our heritage. And so our ritual is to make sure that we celebrate each entity. So we have Cajun Zydeco and blues and traditional jazz and brass bands and Mardi Gras Indians and everything that is a part of our culture. So the ritual for people, for our audience, is to feel their heritage and to celebrate what they want to be with. Do they want to be in the parade with the brass bands? Do they want to be do a dance with the Fado Do stage where everyone does the two-step with a zydeco or a Cajun band. And so those are the rituals that I believe are intentional because you've programmed the music to bring this on. But then there's the organic rituals that the audience, just over the years, we've been around for 50 years now. And I think the audience develops their own organic rituals over the years in their celebration. And it's always amazing to watch sort of what bubbles up as people make this a ritual visit every year after year. They come and, we're in, depending on the year, we can be anywhere from, we're always on 2 weekends. Traditionally, we're a 7-day festival, and we're a daytime festival. So 8 hours of music, 14 stages a day for 7 days. And it's, hundreds of bands, and it's a wonderful way for people to come together and celebrate. So I guess for me, the ritual is that feeling of joy and the reason for wanting to come back. And I don't know. I guess I'm not sure. What I want to say is that this year for me was interesting watching people's rituals turn virtual. But I think we'll probably get into that a little later.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Christine. That is lovely. All of us have the context of being programmers and presenters and creating that structure. And a lot of the rituals that we've talked about so far have really focused on recognition and inclusion and welcoming. I'm wondering if there's any rituals that you have watched develop or have plans to develop for your various festivals. I'll give you an example. The festival that I'm involved with, we've been going for 34 years now. And one year we lost a number of our community, both previous artists, volunteers, and we built an altar at our festival for people to come and recognize their loved ones, their ancestors. And what has emerged out of our altar is that artists and returning artists will bring offerings to the community, which was not anything we ever anticipated happening as part of our altar. And artists would come and leave their music for other members of the community. They would bring their own pictures and mementos and remembering stones. And it surprised us. It wasn't anything that we had anticipated. And we had originally, set it up for the community as we knew it, our volunteers and our audience members, our board members, and that sort of thing. So I'm wondering, in your very particular roles as programmers and organizers, how has that notion of rituals emerged for you? Is there something that you are going to bring forward in future festivals, something that maybe you tried in the past or experienced elsewhere? And Kamara, I'd love to start with you on that.
Oh, good. I was like, I was getting sparky.
Love it.
So, the first things that come to mind is, that our organization, Country Soul Songbook, is really focused on the artist, right? So we're really interested in gathering the community of artists, and really positing the artist as the leader of the conversation, as opposed to the person on whom an industry is enacted and enacts its tentacles and things, that really trying to place artists at the forefront and leading the conversation about all things that have to do with what artists do. And so part of that is about, we're big believers in the fact that artists create ritual, right? That they're natural ritual creators, they're natural priests, they're natural, constructors of ritual. And as an artist, that's why I want to do this project, right? My first and foremost interest in making the project is as an artist, right? I want to, expand that community, but I really also want to stay focused on what I do as an artist. And so, so for instance, an important element of what we do at Country Soul Songbook is that this community that I'm a part of, the Durham kind of Americana country roots community, I try to set up creative situations, which I think of as kind of ritual situations. We set up especially as concerns, singing the canon, right? So a big intention of the project is to put the canon into Black bodies, into queer bodies, into these kind of underrepresented bodies that you wouldn't expect to hear Islands in the Stream coming from a bunch of queer and Black folk, right? So that's kind of part of the weaving that artists do as ritualists, I think. And so that's kind of how we're approaching it, is the artists are the makers of the ritual, and where does the art lead us to make those rituals with that idea that it is a weaving. It's not, the ritual doesn't get made in one foul swoop. The ritual gets made by repeating a pattern and by creating a continuous groove of energy that then others can follow in, right? And that's how rituals gain their power anyway, is by, that's why what makes them a ritual, right, is they get done again. Then they get done again. The meaning deepens, the power amplifies, so that's kind of how we focus the energy there.
I'm breaking all the rules here with my mute button. Gerry, how does that translate for Koopa Doopa?
Often they start with something you program, and then the amount of engagement sort of defines where it goes from there. There was one project that we programmed a couple of years ago, which was called the Insecurity Guards. And they're a wonderful group. They're sort of based between the UK, Melbourne, and they've even got some members here. And what they did is Cuba Duper. Now, the name comes from Cuba Street in Wellington, which actually came from a ship called the Cuba. It's not a reference to Cuba, the country, although we do love Cuban culture here. And with these the Insecurity Guards, what they did is part of the festival kaupapa or values, or is to celebrate diversity and creativity. And so we very much like to blur the line between the audience and the performer. So everyone gets into costume, a bit like the Mardi Gras type vibe. And so these guards, they went around and got people to write down their insecurities and then pop them into a little locked box. And then at the end of the festival, we had a ritual where we actually set fire to all these insecurities. And that really, people really loved it, and they got, very invested. All the insecurity guards were mental health first aid trained, so they could really deal with, different degrees of, emotions that would come out during this process, because it's a very personal thing. So that was 2 years ago. We programmed it again last year, but obviously had to cancel like you all. And as soon as the borders open again, it's a project that we'd like to get back and really develop as part of the festival.
I love the notion of insecurity guards. I know that.
So great.
I know that we're all here, engaged in our community and learning from one another, and I'm pretty sure we all took a note on that one.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
need a security guard.
Yes.
And like that, I guess, as well as rituals, I guess we have a lot of traditions, So another one is the whole concept of mass music. So every year we put it out to the community, who's got a mass musical project that we can pull in, from young kids that are learning their instruments. So the first year it started with a Battle of the Bones, where we actually got 76 trombonists And we got the classical ones to parade from one end of the street and the jazz guys from the other end, and they met in the middle and had the Battle of the Bones. The next year we had the Battle of the Saxes, which was 50 plus saxophonists that again had a bit of a riff off in the middle. The next year we had Blowing Your Own Trumpet with all the trumpeters. And this coming year, in a month's time, we're very lucky. We're in a very unique position in New Zealand where festivals are going ahead as normal. So we've got a project called Cuba Tuba. And when we went offline last year and had to cancel, the composer made a video together and spread it around all the music schools around Wellington. And during the lockdown, all these young kids and different players learnt the tune. So we're trying to get 50 plus tubas to do a parade through the Cuba Duba site this year to continue that sort of ritual of mass brass, really, rather than even, it's quite specific.
Oh, that sounds amazing. Christine, how have you intentionally or unintentionally, that has now become intentional, contributed to some rituals at Jazz and Heritage?
I think I'll riff on Gerry a little bit and talk about some of the parades that we do. There's a tradition in New Orleans, a ritual of how we say goodbye to the dead. We put the fun in funeral, as they say, and there's a tradition where you do the dirge. There's a parade with the coffin in a horse-drawn carriage, and a dirge is playing by a brass band, and it's very solemn. And there's a very certain walk that people do behind the carriage, and it's heavy and mindful, and you think of the person you're saying goodbye to. And then when you set them free, there's a whole string of songs that you do, but when you finally set them free and you've played oh gosh, my brain just went. But then the shift changes and it becomes a celebration of life. And, the second line, the band starts to play, the brass band plays, everyone is dancing. And that's when you just release everything and you celebrate. And so we keep that ritual at the festival, especially when we say goodbye to one of our very important legends here. So say Fats Domino, when he passed away, we did a tribute show, but then we also had a very special second line throughout the fairgrounds. And we parade at what we call our ancestors, where we have statues set up of these special people that have left us, that we want to celebrate and have them be a part of the festival forever. So we always do an unveiling of a statue when we do one of these jazz funeral parades. In 2020, unfortunately, we were planning on doing one we lost Dr. John, we lost Art Neville, just way too many important people to us. And so our ritual is to do a tribute show on stage and really celebrate their music. But then we also do something that is very just a ritual of New Orleans and do a proper jazz funeral.
I was struck by that, putting the fun in funeral.
And, it becomes such a celebration of life that you let the sorrow go and you celebrate life. It's a really wonderful way to say goodbye.
And that idea of letting it all go and celebrating life, I think it's definitely something that we all want to center into our festivals. And Alan, you've talked about how your festival is very different than a lot of the traditional forms of festival, but is there anything that you have added or grown within the confines of sākihiwē?
Yeah. So our festival, we set up 4 different sites, or 4 sites in 4 different neighborhoods throughout Winnipeg's core, and a big part of it, a big draw actually, is the free barbecue. That's what most people come for. And what's been really nice though is that since we're in these different neighborhoods, oftentimes when we're setting up, there's our homeless relatives in the parks or in the areas that we're hoping to have the celebration, or we're planning to have the celebration. And so they're still our relatives. And what I saw in the beginning years is that, you know, our volunteers and our partners, our community partners would make sure that they were taken care of as well. And so just that act of not displacing homeless relatives just because they're not as fortunate as us has been a practice that we've adopted formally as well. So yeah, I think that's just it, just taking care of the homeless.
I am
amazing.
Yeah.
I'm getting so inspired by everybody's comments.
That is actually, you all are kicking it out of the park here with the perfect segues. My next question is, I wanted to explore how you've been influenced by the cultures at your festival, whether it's the culture of an individual, but also, you know, the cultures of different segments, like the audience or the artist or the vendors even, or your artisans, and how maybe they have supported or encouraged or helped grow. Alan, you just talked about your volunteers and how they sort of grew that ritual for you that then you brought more formally into your organization. And Gerry, we'd love to start with you on this one.
Sure. I guess in a way, I talked a bit before about Cuba Duper being a celebration of creativity and diversity, and I think a couple of the panelists have already mentioned. But what we're trying to do is represent, the greater Pōneke or Wellington region and what the different creatives are doing here. So one thing that we're trying to do more and more at the moment, as well as having the curated element, is actually handing out autonomy to different communities in Wellington here to actually program areas of the festival, because we can't do everything and we don't have knowledge of every area. So I guess one great advancement this year is we got funding from Creative New Zealand, which is our national arts funding body, and we've been able to put on a huge kaupapa Māori zone. So not just a stage with music, but also wānanga, which is workshops. So there's going to be weaving workshops, there's going to be carving workshops, there's going to be poi, which is basically a traditional form of music and art in Māori. There's going to be the taiaha workshops that I told you about before, kapa haka. So that's a really, a development for us, and being able to really showcase manu whenua, the local people. But then also we've got the local metal community who program a metal stage. We've got the local rainbow community who have a rainbow program at Cuba Duper. We've got a youth program as part of it. There's a techno stage this year. There's a drum and bass stage. But these are all being programmed by people who do that week in, week out in Wellington, but want to bring the fun to Cuba Duper and put it on free for everyone. Because it's a free and open access festival. So I guess it's becoming a ritual for these different community groups to become a part of the festival for that weekend and put on a free event and showcase what their community has to offer.
Oh, thank you. That's a really important thing to note is shared curatorship. And Christine, I'd love you to talk about how your festival works in different types of curatorship and bringing people both into your tradition while sharing their own.
So one thing that we do is each year we have a cultural exchange pavilion, and we choose either a country or culture to celebrate. And we're based around a fairgrounds. It's actually a horse track most of the year. So there's a dirt track around a green center, and most of the stages are just around the track. But we put the cultural exchange pavilion right in the center because culture is the heartbeat, really, of our community. And so what we like to do is spotlight different cultures that are really a part of our heritage. So we've done Haiti, Brazil, Mali, Francophone countries, sort of celebrating our French heritage. We've done indigenous communities, lots of powwows, and different. We were supposed to do Puerto Rico in 2020, and that's going to have to wait until we have better abilities to travel. But it's really wonderful because what we do is we go to these countries. The year of South Africa too. I can't forget to mention that. That was incredible. So what we do is we go to these countries. We have we find people on the ground in each country to sort of serve as a liaison and really tap us into the talent. And we like to do a cross spectrum of really all the sounds of the culture and not just, the one popular kind of genre. And so we bring a lot of musicians, we bring artisans, we bring culinary things. And so we really try to immerse our community into a piece of the heritage of New Orleans. And the broader sense of the festival is people who are traveling to the festival, they really get immersed in the culture of Louisiana because there's very few places where you have, French-speaking Acadians doing Cajun and Zydeco music. And that's the whole southwestern region of Louisiana. We have a very special community. So we celebrate that on the Fado Do stage or the Jazz and Heritage stage. New Orleans is the only place that has Mardi Gras Indians, which is an incredible community that they spend all year hand sewing these suit. Well, some would call it a costume, but it's a suit. It's a Indian suit where they hand weave just the most incredible artwork, and they wear plumes on their heads and these huge headdresses. And they chant, and there's such a deep history and ritual just in the Mardi Gras Indians. And so we do stage performances and parade performances to really show Mardi Gras Indians to the world. So our mission is to celebrate the culture that Louisiana has. And that is definitely, it's just soaked in everywhere on the festival.
Oh, well, thank you for referencing the regalia and the unique ways that you celebrate. I think that a couple of themes have emerged here among everything that we've talked about, and that includes the responsibility we all feel to share and amplify and present culture in a way that is respectful and guided by maybe a curiosity that we all have. And Alan, I'd love to hear where that has factored into the work that you're doing.
Well, our festival presents Indigenous artists, and so there's no Indigenous culture. There's multiple Indigenous nations. They have their own languages, philosophies, sciences, and traditions, and ceremony. And so, but one thing that I would like to say is that, it's very important for us because as a presenter to put Indigenous women at the forefront of our programming and our marketing materials, marketing campaigns, because Indigenous women are still marginalized within our community and also on contemporary or Canadian festival stages. And so, like I said, I think we have an opportunity to use our stage to educate audiences and also educate other presenters. And so we take that pretty seriously.
Oh, thank you. Kamara, how do you do this work with that curiosity? You've talked a lot about the respect and the amplification but tell us a little bit about that. And you're muted, Kamara. No worries.
I keep doing that. I kind of think of us as trying to have our foot in the past and in the future. We're really trying to, use the platform of Country Soul Songbook, yes, to amplify all of these underrepresented voices in country and Americana, but also, and so there's that kind of tradition and lineage respect. Let me put it this way. These underrepresented voices exist in all directions of time. So not only are we trying to amplify the voices that are present right now and give them a platform, give ourselves this platform to kind of reinvent, specifically country Americana. Our focus right now is fairly narrow, but I think, there's plenty. It's a plenty big rabbit hole to go down, and there's plenty need there. But so we're trying to really give artists that opportunity to reimagine the genres and refocus them in these ways that aren't so tied to how these genres kind of get marketed now. So, that's part of our mission, but also part of our mission is to really make sure that we're amplifying the voices that got left behind or that got overlooked or under-recognized, which is kind of that revisiting the canon piece, and kind of creating this living archive of the tradition and also, really trying to push the envelope into the future and what this can look like going forward, especially in these two genres that are, they're fairly problematic when it comes to representation and equity. Not even fairly I said fairly, not fairly problematic, quite problematic in equity and representation. So but we also don't, there's this kind of activist section of what we do too that is about all of the conversations that have to be had around just the equity and inclusion. It's like, yes, here are the artists, we want to represent them, but what are the conversations that need to be had around the land, around the foodways, around around all the ways that we create culture around these genres and create mythology and storytelling about who they belong to and and how they got kind of created into what the general public sees them as now. So there's just a lot of, there's this through line of repair that also has to be done, even as we're looking to the future and trying to create new paradigms for these genres to exist in.
Oh, thank you. You struck on a really key point there. And I know that a lot of us have looked at the work we do and how we do it through a variety of lenses around equity, inclusion, and accessibility. I know at Mission Folk, we've looked at financial barriers to participation, technical barriers to participation. And when you're on a physical site, that's one way of approaching the work and one way of, we can bring people in and work with communities to reduce the physical barriers or the systematic barriers and all of those kinds of things. As we are shifting our work to these digital realms, how has that affected? I'm interested in hearing from each of you on how that has affected some of the rituals we've talked about today, and then also how that has affected the way in which you're doing your work and your organization is doing its work to keep these rituals and traditions and the work going. And Christine, we'd love to start with you, please. Oh, and you're muted.
So for Jazz Fest, we have a foundation, the Jazz and Heritage Foundation, and they fund our local community radio station, WWOZ. And OZ, this year, they called it Festin' in Place, and it was amazing. They programmed a radio show, our usual hours from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. on our usual dates it's always the last weekend of April, first weekend of May. And they mirrored what would have been at the fairgrounds, but they did as a radio show. And they played archival sets from Jazz Fest, because every year we have WWOZ at various stages recording for the radio station, and they do live streams. So they had sets back from 1970s. They played Stevie Wonder with Ella Fitzgerald. It was unbelievable. And then throughout the day, they kept like a really wonderful, the way they programmed the day was the way we program our day at the festival. So the ritual was maintained during lockdown when no one could leave their houses and well, we could leave our house, but no one was allowed to interact. And the whole idea of a festival is gathering together and celebrating together. So people were able to do this thanks to Festin in Place. And it was a really special thing watching people do their celebration either on social media or just out on their front porch and on their lawn. And all the restaurants that were closed down, they ended up having curbside pickup. So you could have your festival favorite food, like your crawfish bread and your, there was the pheasant andouille gumbo and the crawfish enchiladas and the white chocolate bread pudding. And there were all these different curbside pickups where you could do drive-bys. You had to prepay, order online, and then the restaurants were making it so that you could still have your favorite foods at home. And it was just a really amazing way that the whole community, we were brought joy back again for this, this very heavy time when we were all not being able to be together. You had a sense of community because we were all celebrating at the same time in our own spaces. And it was really fun on social media. It turns out WWOZ, they grew exponentially through this Festin in Place. Their viewership grew exponentially. They had over 2.5 million viewers over the period. There was only 50% were local people. They had 50% of the viewers from around the world. They said they had logins from over 100 different countries. So it was really amazing how much spirit was, is just innately the spirit that people bring to Jazz Fest, whether they're there or if it becomes a part of them. And it's a really wonderful thing.
Oh, I love that. I think we should all get together next year and do a panel on food.
I can talk food.
I like festival food. Yeah. Alan, do you want to talk about sort of how you're shifting the work that you do to more digital formats?
Yeah, it was really tough.
Yeah,
definitely. It was really tough. We did end up doing about 43 broadcasts on Facebook and YouTube over the last, since last March. And we rely heavily on our community partners, Mamawe, Ganikanijik, Spence Neighborhood Association, and Central Neighborhoods Winnipeg, for the connection to our audience. And unfortunately, for a lot of those audiences or a lot of those families, they don't have the same access to technology and then the internet that other families across the country might have. And so I think that created a huge barrier for us in reaching them. And so, yeah, it was really nice that we were able to get money out into the Indigenous artist community. But I think we really fell short in connecting with that same audiences that we're trying to connect with on a regular basis.
As a child of aging parents who are also festival fans, there was also, for Mission, we had that same challenge that some of our aging audience didn't have that same comfort with the technology that, I'm not going to lie, we kind of expected, or not expected, but, had assumed that people might be a little bit more engaged in. Kamara, how has that worked out for Country Soul Songbook?
Country Soul Songbook, it actually turned into a huge opportunity because we hadn't planned, part of our kind of long-term plan had been to go online and to create this kind of TV show or a channel or, something that was virtual. But we had planned that for maybe 3 years down the line. We had plans to just kind of keep it really local and keep, just kind of developing our organic content through our own creative community and our own small audiences. And so, our last show, was usually we have a huge bunch of musicians show up at North Star Church of the Arts. We rehearse all this material in the matter of like 2 days, and then it's just up there. And part of it is just that dangerous feeling of like, I don't know everything I'm doing, just go, And so our last show, our last live show was actually on March 15th, which was the day before lockdown in North Carolina. And, we had to kind of quickly pivot and make that show virtual. And I think something happened in that moment where when we had to make that show virtual, that light bulb went off, which was like, oh, that wasn't as hard as we thought it was going to be. It had its glitches. We learned a lot. And then the festival kind of burst forth from that. It was like, oh, our 3 to 5 year plan can be our this year plan. And let's make it happen. And there was less pressure on it to kind of deliver anything, because it was like first of its kind, just go, So in general, even though it was a lot of work and there were only 3 of us kind of throwing it all together, it was this moment, this kind of moment where we were like, oh, we know we have enough. As artists, we know enough people just through our kind of social connections to make this happen and to get the representation that we want and to burst forth into all of these other communities that we never would have thought to do this year, and ended up being having an international reach, and having, people from Canada and Ireland and, almost, I want to say 36 states were represented. So, for us, it was this huge moment of pivoting and miraculous gathering,
I love that. I love the notion of the miraculous. Gerry, how has that gone for you there in New Zealand?
Well, it sounds like we've all been living quite parallel lives in that way. And Kamara, that really resonated what you said there as well. We got the word from the government on the 16th of March we were going into lockdown. And so, all of a sudden had to cancel over 300 different bands and groups of artists. At first, we did like yourselves, we put on a virtual festival a week after the festival would have happened. And we went through that steep learning curve of, getting through those glitches and all the technology around it. But it was a wonderful way of connecting with the audience. And while they were all in lockdown, we were encouraging them to dress up and send in their photos, of how they were looking at home. And really, we ran competitions around that. And it was just fantastic how creative people became. From them, we went on to kind of look at a visual arts program. So we have a visual arts trail called Curators of Cuba, and how we could try and present that in a virtual way. And so we ended up making 14 short videos, basically with the galleries that were exhibiting and the artists, and doing Q&A. And that was such a success that we went on to do another 14. So we did 28 videos around these different galleries around town, I guess one of the interesting things has been going back from that virtual world into the real world. So we basically, we after lockdown, we very quickly went into normality again here, which was, but it stepped down in levels. So we went, at first we had to try and readjust with how to be able to put on shows with under 100 people, One of those projects is I had an orchestra booked, 80 members of an orchestra for Cuba Duper. So there wouldn't be much room for an audience. So that was a really interesting process. So what we did is we broke the orchestra down into small ensembles. So we ended up with 20 smaller ensembles, and we put them into a lot of our local businesses, cafes, restaurants, where we could actually facilitate really small audiences. So that's been an interesting one as well, going back from the virtual into going down tiers until you get back to your full audience again, and how you can get creative around that. It's been quite interesting.
Oh, yeah, thank you. We're just getting to the end of our panel, and some final thoughts here from each of you. I want to thank you for your insights and your honesty and your vulnerability with this topic. And I would love to hear from each of you going into this year, just where are you at with rituals? And we have about 5 minutes left of our day. So Alan, I'd love to start with you.
Can I pass and defer to somebody else for the time being?
Absolutely. We definitely could
Thank
do that. Yeah, Kamara.
Where are we with rituals? You know, we're always planning rituals. I'm always planning rituals. You know, I'm a big believer in the art, like I said, in the artist as ritual maker, and just as an artist, I'm interested in how to, you know, especially as the world becomes kind of more secular and religion kind of takes that back seat, as we've kind of, you know, read about. And you know, I do feel that our cultures and our, you know, as spiritual being, like I feel like everyone's a spiritual being, whether they know it or not, and that we do need rituals to feed our spirits, and that, you know, that really falls to the artist to make them. And so you know, where I am with ritual is always, you know, in that creative like space, trying to figure out, well, what's the best way to create a ritual experience through art? Because I feel, you know, and as everyone's been kind of saying, it's like necessity is the mother of invention. And so, you know, I feel like that's kind of that next frontier for artists. And I'm excited for artists, because I really felt that this year, I just saw it everywhere, that artists felt empowered again, you know, less exploited and more empowered, you know, just as individuals, as to begin to create. And so, you know, I want to do that. I want to facilitate that. I want to create that. I want to see more of that. I want to demand that. So that's what I'll be doing for the foreseeable future.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Gerry, how are you going into this year? You're back in person, and
yeah, that's right. Well, actually, just before this panel here, I came from a Waiata Wānanga, which is a song workshop where kaupapa Māori director Noel, he just composed a song. So as a team, we'll be learning a new waiata, a song that he's written for the festival this year. And we're going to be putting that out to all of our audience so they can join us as part of this opening ceremony and join our voices together and unite as part of that. I'm also inspired by Christine's Putting the Fun in Funeral. And we've got this thing this year called the Cuba Chapel, where we're having like faux weddings and a real wedding. We're going to celebrate there, but also we've got a pimped up coffin where you can have your own like faux funeral, and so people can come and throw flower petals over you, talk about what a great dude you were, you know, and sort of celebrate your life while you're still alive. But I love that line, so I might have to borrow it, Christine.
I love your festival so much.
Use it anytime.
As Kamara just said there, I think the ritual of new creation and for us in our curators, you know, positions to be able to commission new works and find the resource to be able to enable artists to bring new work to our festivals, and hopefully travel to some of yours as well in years to come, you know.
Oh, thank you so much. Christine, any last words?
Yeah, you know, we had to postpone yet again, so we will not be our usual April, May. We have announced that our dates are going to be October 8th through 17th, and we are hopeful that the world will be ready, and, you know, borders will all be open by then. And so, you know, until then, right now is this great glimpse that we have in New Orleans with showing how ritual can be continually celebrated. So Mardi Gras parades are canceled. And instead, one person had this brainstorm of, well, if we can't go to floats and see parades, let's make our house a float. Let's create house floats. And all of New Orleans have become house floats. And it's created this joy walking down the street, looking at people's different creativity and looking at different houses and feeling a spirit of Mardi Gras without there being the proper celebration that we're used to of Mardi Gras. And I think, so take that to Jazz Fest. You know, last year that you couldn't go to Jazz Fest, but we still had the spirit of it through the radio station. And so I think just moving forward, just always knowing that the community has the spirit no matter what. There is such a spirit to celebrate in New Orleans, and there's just no tampering it. Like, there's no way to bring it down. There is always going to be a creative energy, and where there's a will, there's a way, and there's a way to do it whether you're gathering or not. So.
Oh, and Alan, I'm coming back to you. Is there anything that you would like to conclude this conversation?
Yeah, definitely. I think what we're going to do this year is just continue to give back to the Indigenous artist community. And the biggest way we do that is by paying professional artist fees.
Yep.
Thank you, Alan. Yeah, that really brings it back. So we have our host, Chris, back. I just want to say thank you to all of you for sharing your time, your wisdom, and your little slices of world, or not so little slices of world, I shouldn't say that, but thank you so much for being here today. And Chris, thanks for coming back.
I'm glad to be back, and what a fantastic conversation, you guys. It was awesome. Thanks to all for joining this panel, and also a huge thank you to our esteemed panelists, Michelle, Kamara, Alan, Gerry, and Christine. Great job, everyone. Thanks so much for being a part of this. And by the way, to all, this panel will continue to be available as a recording on the Folk Unlocked platform all week, so you can check that out again. Feel free to let others know who may have missed it. And please take a moment to provide feedback about today's offering by posting comments in the chat. Finally, in closing, Folk Unlocked is made available at a pay-what-you-can price point, thanks to the generosity of so many donors. If you would like to support our work, and we hope you will, donations can be made at folk.org/donate. Stay safe, everyone, and connected. We'll see you soon.